Good morning. 24-hour period that begins with the Last Supper and ends with the burial of Jesus Christ is the most significant day in the history of the world that splits the time into BC and AD. We have the opportunity to join Jesus and his disciples on the eve of this pivotal day. Because of John's record, we have the record of the conversation of the Last Supper recorded for us in John chapters 13 and 14, and those are the words that we're looking at. And as we go through and listen into this dialogue, it does give us food for thought. We're going to watch a clip from the visual Bible which reenacts the opening verses of John chapter 13.
It was now the day before the Passover festival. Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. He had always loved those in the world who were his own, and he loved them to the very end. Jesus and his disciples were at supper. The devil had already put into the heart of Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, the thought of betraying Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had given him complete power. He knew that he had come from God and was going to God. So he rose from the table, took off his outer garment, and tied a towel round his waist. Then he poured some water into a wash basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and dry them with the towel around his waist. He came to Simon Peter.
Are you going to wash my feet, Lord?
You do not understand now what I am doing, but you will understand later.
Never, at any time, will you wash my feet.
If I do not wash your feet, you will no longer be my disciple.
Lord, do not wash only my feet, then. Wash my hands and head, too.
Those who have taken a bath are completely clean and do not need to wash themselves, except for their feet. All of you are clean. All except one.
Jesus already knew who was going to betray him. That is why he said, "All of you except one are clean." After Jesus had washed their feet, he put his outer garment back on and returned to his place at the table.
Do you understand what I have just done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and it is right that you should do so because that is what I am. I, your Lord and teacher, have just washed your feet. You then should wash one another's feet. I have set an example for you, so that you will do just what I have done for you. I am telling you the truth. No slaves are greater than their master, and no messengers are greater than the one who sent them. Now that you know this truth, how happy you will be if you put it into practice. I'm not talking about all of you.
I know those I have chosen. But the scripture must come true that says the man who shared my food turned against me. I tell you this now before it happens, so that when it does happen, you will believe that I am who I am. I am telling you the truth. Whoever receives anyone I send receives me also. And whoever receives me receives him who sent me.
Jesus says, and gives us food for thought, says, do as I have done. Let's follow. In the worship folder, there's a sheet. Take it out and let's read through the portion where he, in John chapter 13, verses 12 through 17. Read, when he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. Do you understand what I've done for you? He asked them. You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. I tell you the truth. No servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. How many of you know what WWJD stands for? It used to be that it was on bumper stickers and it was on bracelets. It's an acrostic, WWJD. What does it stand for? What would Jesus do? We're going to address that question this morning. It's a question that we ask before making decisions. Should I do this or that? What would Jesus do? Should I go here or there? What would Jesus do? Before we address that question, we need to address another question. It's a related question. Not WWJD, but WDJD, which would be, what did Jesus do? We have a record of the things that Jesus did, and so when we say WWJD, we have the WDJD to be able to inform us. We have examples that Jesus sets for us, and what we find in the upper room on the eve before he dies is that he gives us a clear example of a WDJD. Let's look at that. What did Jesus do? And the answer is simple. He washed the disciples' feet. In doing so, he gave them an object lesson. And we're going to pause here and look closely at what he did. Not only what he did, but why and how he did it. And we find a couple things then. Jesus did two things. Number one, he expressed faith. This is where it starts with Jesus. And it would be a mistake to miss this part of it, to overlook what fueled Jesus' actions. I think that in teaching about biblical things and about what God would have us to do, we fall into a 90-10 problem. A 90-10 problem. 90% of what is reflected, is presented, deals with what? And only 10% deals with a really important question. If I tell you what to do, and if that's all I tell you, I'm leaving out a critical question, which is, how? You can get a what, but if you don't get a how, what is a what without a how? I think I told you before that in high school, I sold advertising space for a brochure to be handed out at a... I don't see why I keep on heaping abuse on myself like this. Here was the concert. Bobby Goldsboro. And honey, I miss you, and I'm being, these guys. So here's what we were doing. We were calling advertisers and saying there's going to be a concert. Bobby Goldsboro is going to be in concert, and would you buy advertising space? And here's where they're... So when we were looking at this, my friend Mark and I, we needed a summer job. We were in high school. And so there was a great what? Come and make $500 a week, which at that time was a lot of money back in '06. And there was a great what, but then I wish I'd known more about the how. So I have to call these busy businessmen. Okay. there's this guy that doesn't know you, and so I have to get, hey, how you doing? Hey, and, Bobby Goldsboro is going to be in town. And I just click. In fact, this is what happened. There was a sub shop down the street from this place, and my gross profits for that summer, now I was promised, the what was $500 a week. You know what the what was? Really? Negative $50. I lost money because I made some money selling, but I lost money on lunch. It's a great sub shop down the street. Moist bread, and it was just great. A what without a how is there's a problem with that. In my background, I've heard a lot of messages where 90% of it, 45 minutes, goes to the what. Here's what we're supposed to do. And in the last 5 minutes, this is the how that I most often get. And there are some truths to the how. But this is all I got, time after time. You can only do this if God helps you. God has to help you to do these things that we've just expressed. So, if you then do the wrong thing, confess your sin, and ask God to retake the throne of your life, and He'll give you the power to do the right thing. And it wasn't that there is not some truth there, but that's the only thing I heard. 45 minutes of what? Then the how was almost like the little stuff in the infomercial. And then after the big, buy this, do this, and then it's almost that little statement, the little writing at the bottom of a thing. And I think that's a 90-10 problem, because 90% what and 10% how doesn't help us very much. We can know what we're supposed to do. But then the question goes, how do I come to the place where I can stoop and serve when everything inside me recoils from it? Or I can do it with some people who will honor me. But I don't want to stoop and serve when no one else is serving. When this person I'm serving, he should be serving me. You felt those feelings, haven't you? How are we supposed to do this? Where do we get the resolve? Where do we get the motivation? And even if we do it, we can't do it in such a way as to be washing somebody's feet and spending one eye washing their feet and the other eye on him. I hope you're watching this. See how good, and that's insincere too, isn't it? How do we do this stuff? How involved faith for Jesus? Faith for Jesus meant that he knew where he was going to be by the weekend. But it says, Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So, he got up from the meal, took off the outer clothing, then it went into the what? But did you get the how? Here's the fuel. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, that he had authority. Not only authority, that he had come from God and was returning to God. As we saw last week, we tend to think that Christianity is distinguishing between clean and unclean. Things that I should do, things that I shouldn't do. And there are things that are absolute. God has some absolute standards. Some things that are in, some things that are out. He's not a relativistic God. He's some absolute things. So Jesus understood this. But what we find, though, is that the fuel for Jesus wasn't that he distinguished between clean and unclean. In fact, he didn't. The religious environment at that time, you always do a ritual washing, and he didn't tell his disciples to do that. He didn't tell them to distinguish between clean and unclean. He distinguished between now and then. See, he could stoop now because he knew that then he was going to be with the Father. And I would commend that that's the how. There's some how in that. I'll tell you what. How would it affect, and I'll throw myself in this question too, if your ability to believe that within, I don't know how many years, you were going to be with him, and what if you really knew it? Now, all of us know it, kind of. But what if it settled down in, and you understood that when the dust clears and your last breath has been breathed, that you will fall asleep and wake up with him? And you had a sense for what that was going to be like. that you are returning to someone whose presence you desire more than anything. Like I said, it's the image that I get of heaven. It's like a fish being put back in the water. It's flipping around on the shore, and then it hits the water, and again, how does the fish feel? Joyful? It's more than joyful, isn't it? Content? It's more than content. You know what the fish feels? Alive. Alive. This is what I was made for. That's what heaven's going to be like. How would it affect us? Again, all of us, we live in this. We can't spend all our time. But what if we ratchet up our ability to think 50, 60, 70 years from now? If you were able to believe more deeply that you would be with him, would that belief enable you to stoop? I want to suggest that it would. And that's what we find with Jesus. He knew where he came from and where he was going. So he had no ability stooping temporarily because he knew he was going to rise eternally. He expressed faith. This is where it begins. This is why Jesus did what he did. If you come away from Jesus' life, you say, that's what it's like to be holy. What's it like to be holy? I think with Jesus, it's the ability to serve, to lay his life down, because he was able to distinguish between the brief now and the eternal then. That's a difficult thing, though, isn't it? I think there's a connection, though. This is a person with Jesus whose faith in his connection with the Father is unshakable. That's what made Jesus Jesus. And for Jesus, he was able to stoop in this life because he knew he was going to rise in the next. I think that's what faith does. It enables us to stoop in this life because we know we're going to rise in the next. I think it's hard. To the degree we don't really, and again, all of us deal with doubt. So if you say, Mike, I doubt, I get that. I understand that. But if we really don't believe there's any chance we're going to be with him in the next life, that's going to affect our ability to stoop in this one. Would you agree? I think that's what we find. There's a sense, it begins with faith. Again, we'll find the verse is faith expressed, and you express the faith through love. That's what did Jesus do? There it is. He expressed faith through love. He didn't express faith only by saying the right things, by what he did. He stooped and served. That's how faith apparently is supposed to express itself. He led them to the end, and this is, the washing of their feet, is the indication of what love really means. It descends. Songs that Joel chose. One of the things we're going to have, and I'm going to, after the song, one of the things we feel very fortunate to be able to have Joel in a position of influence and responsibility as he has graduated from seminary is that deep within Joel, you put your finger on the pulse of his spiritual life, and I think he gets it from his mother and father, and he gets it from his grandfather and those in his family who there's a long legacy of ministry in the Fredrickson family, and some of them are here. And you get the sense that it's not just something that he thinks. It's kind of woven into the character of who he is. And he's authentic. And that's one reason we feel so fortunate to be able to have Joel, because what he feels, it courses through his life. And he does the things he does because he believes them. He's approachable, relational, and he understands service and he has a passion for that. And he reflects that in youth ministry, which he'll be giving leadership in the area of youth ministry and worship. We just love the fact of what do you do in worship along with Jesse and Sheila and the different teams we have. And youth and young adults, those will be his areas of responsibility. Jesus, when he's showing what love means, he doesn't, come on, Peter, I love you, man. He's like nuggies. And that's not really what it was like. When Jesus expresses love, he serves, humble service. Okay, that's what he did. Jesus served and stooped. He expressed faith through love. Okay, now let's ask the question, what would Jesus do? When we get in situations, look what it says in verses 15 through 17. Verses 15 through 17 of John 13, I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. I tell you the truth. No servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. He gives us an object lesson. What would Jesus do? He would wash feet. And what does this mean? We have a sense for what it means. The early church interpreted it in 1 Timothy 5. Listen to what it says. It's talking about when should we take care of widows? Again, in that context, a widow that lost a husband was in a place where the Social Security welfare system really didn't cover that within the Christian community, we know. And so they were trying to figure out when should we enfold a widow and provide for her with the proceeds of what we contribute, and when should we not? And this is what it says: no widow may be put on the list unless she is over 60, has been faithful to her husband, and is well known for good deeds, such as bringing up children, showing hospitality, washing the feet of the saints, helping those in trouble, and devoting herself to all kinds of good deed. Washing the feet of the saints, it doesn't seem just hospitality, because it talked about hospitality. It seemed to be describing one who had the capacity, when there was a saint in need, to stoop and do menial service for that person, when they had the resources that could supply the person's need. And so that's what washing the feet of the saints came to exemplify. Somebody, when there was a practical need, a garage that needs to be cleaned out, food that needs to be brought. Somebody is in crisis. They need an ear. They don't need somebody just to tell them a lot of things. Let us not love with word or tongue alone, but in deed and truth. That's what washing the feet of the saints became. Somebody who was not too holy or spiritual to roll up their sleeves and get involved in the messy job of meeting practical needs. It's tough for us, we look at that room, to reproduce the dynamic that existed. There's a couple reasons why I think in this country we have religious freedom, and that is an unmistakable privilege. In some ways, and I believe it's also, in a way, an unmistakable liability. We have a hard time entering into the dynamic of what existed here and in the early church in general, because we don't need to. In the early church, consider that those who joined the Christian community had severed their ties to the good life. Being baptized in that context identified you with the Christian community, and at times in Israel, it was to be a criminal, to be a Christian. And in life in general, it did move you out of the place where you could move with the movers and the shakers. So here's what it meant then. And it doesn't mean the same today. And I'm not saying that's bad, that's good. It's just as what's real. In that context, if you become a Christian, you have severed some real ties. If you're a Jew, you can't go to the synagogue. You're not welcome there. And that was the center of fellowship, and you made business connections, and in that state, that's where welfare and Social Security as it existed came from. So in stepping into Christianity, you were stepping into this very unsure place. And if you did that, when you came together in a Christian community, it would feel different, wouldn't it? It would feel different. This was the only sort of support you had. Now for us, and again, this is where it's a privilege. We walk out of this place, and we don't have to hide the fact that we went to a Christian meeting. And where'd you go to church? I went here. Where did you go to church? I went here. What did you think? Did you like it? No, I didn't like it. It wasn't jazzy enough. No, really. And what'd you think? You understand that the whole sense, the whole tenor of church attendance, it's a luxury. It's like a show. In that sense, they dragged themselves in here because there was no other source of support. They didn't get smiles many other places. And when they welcomed into these communities, they had needs, and they had no other place to meet them. Would you imagine? If we were gathered in a living room, and we understood what it was like to be alienated. And we're sitting down, and it's a smaller community. And again, I'm not blowing up church today. You understand what I'm saying? As we think it's hard to really enter in and touch what's happening. Just seeing across the table this person, we know they have no other source of support. What John's saying, what a Christian does is a thing that might have been a little bit easier to do. Everybody rolled up their sleeves because they had to. They had to. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's just challenging. That's all I'm saying. It's a challenge to enter into it because church doesn't mean the same thing. However, while we might not be able to reproduce the original setting, the mandate is the same. The mandate is the same. And if you look in the verse, Denise referenced it in the children's message, the only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. How do you put the ball through the hoop? Express your faith through love. How do you take the ball across the goal? Express your faith through love. How do you shoot the puck in the net? Express your faith through love. How do you round the bases and go into home? Express your faith through love. What counts? Express your faith through love. What matters? Express your faith through love. Express faith through love. That's what counts. That's what matters. That's what it means to put the ball through the hoop. It doesn't mean to sit in a service. It doesn't mean, you know what I mean? It does, because it starts there. You have to express faith. But it's rolling up your sleeves. It's getting involved. That's what it is. That's what it means to put the ball through the hoop. And with that thing, then, it begins with faith. What would Jesus do? Express faith through love. Faith is the foundation of love. Here's a question. What does it mean to have faith? What does it mean to have faith? We do all the right things? I hope it doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean faith will... look what it says. In Ephesians 3, in him and through faith in him, we may approach God with freedom and confidence. You know what faith means? We approach God with these thoughts in mind. I can approach confidently, and I can speak freely. That's what it means. I can approach confidently, and I can speak freely. Some of us think of approaching God, and it's like, oh, I can't really talk to him, and I can't really be open with him. I have to just say all these words that I think he wants to hear, but we're not honest with him. You know what faith allows us to do? The more you understand about Jesus, the more you put your faith in him, you don't enter God's presence irreverently, reverently, but confidently. I don't need to shuffle in. I don't need to pretend. Here's what we know from Jesus. God wants a relationship with you. Not with some facsimile of you. With you. Understanding what you're like and what you deal with. He wants you to approach the throne of grace, and because of Jesus, he wants you to approach confidently. And he wants you to speak freely, to tell him reverently, honestly, about what's happening, and to ask for his help. It's a relationship. Confidence and openness is I think it's the fuel of service. Jesus knew the Father, knew he was going to go. They had a relationship. He was able to leverage that intimacy to serve. So here's what I'm saying. To the degree you establish a connection with Jesus where you understand that you can approach confidently and enter freely, as that confidence goes up, as confidence that you can go into the presence of the Father, and when that's acted upon in terms of prayer and talking to him, listening to him through the Word, as confidence goes up, the ability to serve, well, you'll have the ability to stoop. Confidence goes up, the ability to stoop happens proportionally. Express faith through love. We are to love one another. Love must be an expression of faith. It says, express your faith through love. Look what it says in 1 John, last verse. This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers. If anyone has material possessions and sees his brother in need, but has no pity on him, how can the love of God be in him? Dear children, let us not love with words or tongue, but with actions and in truth. This then is how we know that we belong to the truth, and how we set our hearts at rest in His presence whenever our hearts condemn us. For God is greater than our hearts, and He knows everything. Faith leads to love. Living faith is loving faith. And that's what we get from James. Some people say, James, he's off. No, he's not off base. He's saying the same thing John is saying. Here's what John says, if anyone has material possessions and sees his brother in need but has no pity on him, how can the love of God be in him? Again, think of sitting in that place, seeing the needs represented, and hardening. How can the love of God be there? And that's what he's indicating. What did James say? What good is it, my brothers, if a man claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save him? Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. You're in that house, and one who claimed Christ comes in without clothes and food. And what James is saying, if there's really no rolling up the sleeve and trying to meet that need, is that faith? That's really not Christian faith, is it? You understand what I'm saying? It can't be. You know why? Because we serve a Savior who stooped and washed feet. And He says, do what I have done and be blessed. Go. If one of you says to him, go, I wish you well, keep warm and well fed, have a good week. Yeah, geez. Don't get cold. Hope you're not too hungry this week. But does nothing about his physical needs, what good is it? Living faith is loving faith. In the same way, faith by itself, if not accompanied by action, is dead. That's understandable, isn't it? Yeah, of course it is. You know what's interesting? Faith leads to love, but love leads back to faith. Here's what it says in 1 John. Dear children, let us not love with words or tongue, but with actions and in truth. This, then, is how we know that we belong to the truth, and how we set our hearts at rest in His presence. Whenever our heart condemns us, we're going to sing a song. Come on, back up. What it seems to indicate is that faith leads to love, and love leads back to faith. When you're in the environment and you have the experience of rolling up your sleeves and being involved in meeting the needs of one another, there's something that registers in us as real. This is real. And that realness leads to a greater sense of, you know what? I know I'm connected, and that connection leads to service, and the service leads to connection, and connection leads to service. That seems to be the way it works. Faith leads to love, and love leads back to faith. And what Jesus says, if you understand these things, what I say makes sense? Because it's really what it says. You'll be blessed if you do them.